Welcome back to Sports Beat. It's time now to turn our attention to the best postseason in all of sports, the NCAA Men's Basketball Tournament. I'm your host, Danny DeCrescenzo, and alongside me at the desk is my partner in crime, JJ Beale, and holding it down on the small wall is the one and only Joseph Viglucci. Boys, are you ready to talk some March Madness?
I can't wait. It's the most wonderful time of the year. We've been waiting for this since the end of November, and now it's finally here.
Definitely, Danny. Can't be more excited to be talking about March Madness with you guys.
Oh, me too, absolutely. And let's get right into it. So this year has certainly been the year of the upset. With 14 upsets in this tournament, we have seen the most upsets in March ever. With so many Cinderellas, which one is your favorite and why?
Get out of the way, Loyola Chicago. It is the UCLA Bruins time. They have their own sister Jean and Hep Cronin, Mick Cronin's father. The UCLA Bruins have been a great story, coming from the first four to the final four, led by Kentucky transfer Johnny Juzang. They've been a great story all year, and they're my favorite team in March.
For me, I got to go with Oregon State. They were 12th seed in this March Madness. Were ranked initially to finish last in the Pac-12, came out, won that conference championship, come in the Elite Eight. Were unable to beat Houston and get that Final Four trip, but they, for me, were incredible. Ethan Thompson was amazing this whole tournament, so I got to give credit to Oregon State.
Long live Beaver Fever. Now, let's look at something that hasn't been so great this March, the Big Ten's prospects. They sent 9 teams to the tournament, and they've been called one of the deepest and most competitive conferences in the history of college basketball, but only one team made it past the second weekend. Guys, what went wrong for the Big Ten this tournament?
You have to look at two things. One, the seeding that they had in the tournament and the matchups that they got, and two, maybe they're a little bit overhyped. First, going into the seeding that they had, I mean, you can't have Iowa against Oregon. Oregon was one of the misseeded teams in the tournament, one of the most misseeded teams in the tournament. And then you have Oral Roberts with the top scorer in the country going up against Ohio State. They can't do anything about that. That's just a bad matchup for them. And maybe they were a little bit overrated. Maybe they weren't as good as we thought they were coming into the season.
Totally. For me, it's not one thing. There's multiple reasons, but I think this just defines what March Madness is. You know, you had a record 9 schools coming from the Big Ten. Only one of them made it past the second week, as you said. Iowa and Luka Garza ran into that Loyola defense. You had a bunch of other teams. Ohio State, as we mentioned, ran into Oral Roberts, couldn't get it done. So I just think this defines madness. But what JJ mentioned before with the matchups, I think that points to it as well.
Yeah, I think we all knew the Big Ten was in for some trouble when Oral Roberts pulled off that incredible upset. Guys, I mean, they had such a great run, right?
Yeah, I mean, you really saw it coming out of nowhere. They had one of the top scorers in the nation, the top scorer in the nation. But other than that, they didn't really have much to offer. But Ohio State has struggled on the defensive end all year. So you saw them maybe winning that game, but I didn't see them going further than that.
No, totally. For me, I actually had Oral Roberts in my bracket for about 10 seconds because I went with my gut and I was like, Ohio State is just an overrated team. As JJ mentioned, their defensive stance is not that great in terms of the rest of the conference and the rest of the March Madness. So I think definitely it was Oral Roberts. Credit to them. I really wish that they were able to get past that Sweet 16 matchup. They were fighting, and they were another upset, as we talked about before, Danny, that just really took name this March Madness.
Of course, it was the defining upset of the entire tournament. And something else that makes this tournament unprecedented is the lack of blue blood schools, especially from the East Coast. I mean, just need to look at who didn't make the tournament, Duke and Kentucky. And, you know, Gonzaga is really playing well. They have 5 straight 30-win seasons, and they're back in the Final Four. Are we seeing a changing of the guard at the top of the men's game?
Well, Florida State came up with a term that I really like, and it's new blood. You have blue bloods, and you have the new bloods. You have Florida State. You have Oregon. You have Gonzaga, who are these perennial contenders. And now that they can recruit nationwide with AAU and the growing power of social media, you're seeing all these top recruits go to maybe schools that are closer to them and not as big of a names because they know they can make a name for themselves there.
I think for me in the long term, I think we're seeing a changing of the guard. I see, you know, Coach K is getting up there. John Calipari, head coach of Kentucky, is aging. Not much longer. These guys might not be coaching their programs for that much longer. So I think in the long term, these guys will maybe be going to more schools like Baylor. And as JJ mentioned before, with the prevalence of social media, you can really get out there and make a name for yourself on smaller schools, as opposed to these giants that have just been running through the tournament these past forever.
Of course, and I think as we've seen this March, it's great for players who are able to make a name for themselves outside of the traditional basketball powers. But before we wrap up, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you who you have winning it all. The Final Four is set. Gonzaga, Baylor, Houston, and the Cinderella story that has been UCLA. Who do you have taking home the championship this March?
Well, we're supposed to get this matchup in December. It got canceled, unfortunately, due to COVID. It's finally time. I believe we're going to see Baylor and Gonzaga in the championship. Baylor has some of the best guys in the country in Jared Butler, Masio Teague, Matt Mayer, and I think they have too much firepower. Gonzaga hasn't been tested all year. I want Baylor over Gonzaga in an absolute fire fest in the championship.
I think this is going to be one for the ages. I got Gonzaga versus Baylor as well. I love what Marc Few's been able to do with that Gonzaga program this year. Jalen Suggs, potential #1 overall pick in the NBA draft. Marc Few's really been able to make that undefeated team one of the best teams ever in the March Madness that we've ever seen. So I really like Gonzaga over Baylor in that Final Four, in that Final Two matchup, but it's going to be definitely one for the ages.
Yeah, I agree on the matchup, but as a closet Gonzaga fan, I think the Bulldogs are finally going to take it home this year and have the first undefeated season since the 1970s. That's all the time we have tonight for our March Madness discussion. I would like to thank my panelists JJ Beale and Joe Viglucci for joining me tonight. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at HofstraSB, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch all of our episodes and packages. I'm Danny DeCrescenzo. Enjoy your night.